I started the Appalachian Trail in early spring, aiming to make it from Georgia to Maine before the cold crept in again. I wasn't chasing a spiritual awakening or some cinematic self-discovery. I just wanted time offline, no phone, no news, no obligations. I needed my head to be quiet for a while. I stuck to my plan, early mornings, steady pace, no distractions. I kept to myself mostly, nodding at other hikers, sleeping light in shelters, or camping a few yards off the trail. It was the third week in northern Tennessee when I decided to push a little farther than usual. There was a gap on the map where a few people camped. No water sources, no shelters, nothing appealing. I wanted space, and I figured no one would bother going that far between reliable stops. The last few hours of that day were hard. The incline was steady and the path got narrow. I stopped talking to myself and focused on moving my feet. When I reached a clearing around dusk, I dropped my pack, too tired to care about much else. It wasn't an ideal campsite. Sloped, patchy ground, no water nearby, but it was open and still. That was enough. I set up the tent, got the stove going, and heated some food. While I waited, I walked a few steps to stretch my legs. That's when I noticed it. Gray ash in the grass about 30 feet away, and a blackened ring of stones. A dead campfire, fresh enough that I could still smell burnt pine. There were small shoe prints around it, not hiking boots, thin soles, kids' shoes. I scanned the area, expecting to see more signs, gear, trash, even a forgotten sock. But it was just the fire pit, like someone had set up, burned some wood, and vanished. It stuck in my head all through dinner. I kept glancing toward it while I ate. At one point, I walked over and touched the rocks, still faintly warm. Not hot, but warmer than the surrounding ground. That meant someone had been there, very recently, possibly that same day. But I hadn't passed anyone going south. I hadn't seen any footprints on the trail. No wrappers, no cigarette butts, no broken twigs. Just the fire, and those small prints. The sun was low, and I didn't want to waste energy worrying. I zipped myself into the tent, listened to a podcast I'd downloaded weeks ago, and let the exhaustion do its job. Around midnight, I woke up. No reason, no noise. Just sudden alertness, like my body had switched itself back on. I sat up and checked the time. 12:07 a.m. The tent was quiet. No wind, no animals. I unzipped the flap halfway and looked outside. The trees were still. The moon gave off just enough light to see the clearing. I let the flap fall back and lay down again. A few minutes passed. Then I noticed the smell. Not strong, not acrid, just faint, like burning sap. I sat up again, fully now, and unzipped the tent completely. The clearing was the same. Nothing moved. But the smell was clearer. Fire. Real fire. Not just smoky clothes or old ashes. Fresh. I grabbed my headlamp, slipped on my boots, and stepped outside. The cold bit harder than I expected. I stood still and turned slowly, light passing over trees, rocks, brush. Then I saw it. The fire pit. The same one I'd found earlier. It was glowing again. Not ablaze, but pulsing red beneath a layer of white ash. No flames, just coals, like someone had just stirred it. I walked closer, slowly. No prints around it now, none that I could see. I crouched and held my hand near the heat, warmer than before. The center flickered slightly, like breath had passed over it moments earlier. I stood up and looked around. The woods gave nothing away. I didn't sleep again. I sat in the tent, boots still on, headlamp beside me. Every so often I'd peek out. The fire pit remained dim but alive, refusing to die out entirely. By morning, it had cooled. No glow, just gray ash and a few dry stones. I packed quickly and got moving, pushing harder than usual. That night, I camped near others. The next day, at a trail junction with a ranger station not far off, I mentioned it to one of the volunteers. Just small talk. I didn't say much, just that I'd seen a fire pit, still warm, odd spot, strange shoes. He looked up halfway through my sentence. Kids' shoes? I nodded. Yeah, real small prints, not boot treads. He asked me where. I showed him the map, pointed out the approximate area. He didn't say anything for a second. Then he told me that a family had reported their son missing on a section nearby. 2 years ago, no trace. He was 9. They'd been camping half a mile from the spot I described. He told me the case was cold. I nodded, thanked him, and left. I didn't tell anyone else. Not because I was scared, but because I didn't want anyone filling in blanks I didn't understand. That was the only time I hiked that stretch alone. We were 5, 3 from college, 2 from a meetup app. The plan was simple. 4 days on a quiet stretch of the Appalachian Trail, camping 2 nights out, then circling back. No phones, just maps and offline GPS. We left the car at a ranger-approved point, locked it, and stepped into the tree line late Friday morning. Day 1 went fine. We moved fast, spirits were high, and the weather stayed on our side. We found a flat site by late afternoon, near a creek, and pitched tents while someone boiled water for dinner. No drama, no stress, no signal. It felt good. Day 2. We aimed for a shaded ridge where the topo map showed a wide valley below. It meant descending a few hundred meters, but we'd read online that the views were worth it. We got there around 5 p.m., after a long, uneven descent. The spot wasn't spectacular, but there was space for 5 tents and a circle of stones from a previous fire pit. We were far from any marked shelters. It felt isolated, but safe. Someone cracked open a packet of marshmallows. Someone else collected wood. We sat around and told stories, normal stuff. We all turned in before midnight. No one said anything about the noises until morning. It started with Leah. She said she'd heard crying, maybe a woman or a child. Short bursts, never long, almost too faint to be real. She hadn't left her tent. She thought someone was dreaming nearby. Jordan said he'd heard it too. But from lower down the slope, not from camp. He'd unzipped his tent and listened. It had stopped quickly. The rest of us laughed it off, made jokes. No one took it seriously. Probably an animal. Maybe wind carrying a sound from somewhere else. We moved on. The hike out of the valley took longer than expected. The incline was brutal, and some sections had eroded badly. Halfway up, we stopped for water. That's when we noticed the tunnel. Set into the rock wall, half obscured by vines and moss, was a low arch of stone. Man-made, maybe 6 feet wide, 4 feet high. It looked like it had been carved directly into the mountain. Inside, only darkness. The edges were marked with rusted steel bolts. No one said it, but we all understood. Mine shaft. Old, probably sealed decades ago. But this one wasn't sealed. Just overgrown, no gate, no warning sign. We stood around it for a while. One person threw a rock in. It clattered once, then silence. Someone else called out. Nothing came back. We didn't go inside. None of us even leaned in. We just stared until someone said we were wasting daylight. We hiked on. That night, we set camp again, near a dry ridge. Leah went quiet. Jordan too. The rest of us joked about how creepy the shaft had looked. I remember saying I'd have nightmares about it collapsing while we crawled inside. No one laughed. After midnight, I woke up to footsteps. Not heavy, not fast. Just soft crunching, moving between the tents. No voices, no flashlights. I didn't unzip. I didn't call out. I listened. Eventually it stopped. The next morning, two things were off. Leah's tent zipper was open, just a few inches, enough to notice, and Jordan's boots were outside, but they were wet, mud-caked. He hadn't left camp, he said, but the mud didn't match our ridge. It was red, like clay. The rest of us exchanged glances. No one made jokes this time. By mid-morning, we were back on the main trail. The distance felt longer than it should have. When we finally reached the parking lot, the first thing everyone did was check for reception. While waiting for the GPS to catch up, I opened my photos. I'd taken a shot of the ridge on day 1, before we descended into the valley. Zooming in, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. On the slope, below where we had camped, was a collapsed section of ground, barely visible. A depression in the trees, shaped like a funnel. The brush around it looked newer than the rest. Greener, less settled. I showed it to Jordan. He stared too long. When he spoke, his voice dropped. He said it looked like a cave-in, maybe recent. Maybe not. The tunnel hadn't been alone. We didn't go back. Not because we were afraid of the dark, but because the crying had come from below us. We were somewhere between Hogback Ridge and Spivey Gap when we met him. A man in his 40s, clean-shaven, broad shoulders, crisp orange vest. The kind worn by park rangers during fire season. He had no pack, no gear, not even a water bottle. Just a laminated map rolled tight in one hand. It was early afternoon, sun directly overhead, the air dry and still. We'd left our last shelter a few hours earlier, pacing ourselves through switchbacks and loose gravel. Our group was small, me, Dylan, and Sarah, friends from college trying to section hike part of the Appalachian Trail over spring break. It was Sarah who first spotted him, standing at the edge of the trail like he'd been waiting. He greeted us calmly, asked where we'd come from, and where we were headed. His tone was professional, nothing friendly, like reading off a checklist. When we answered, he nodded, but didn't write anything down. His map remained rolled tight in his fist. He told us there had been bear activity reported farther up near high rocks. Nothing aggressive, just sightings. He advised we camp off-trail that night, somewhere lower, and to avoid cooking strong-smelling foods. He didn't offer alternatives or mention any ranger station nearby. His speech was brief and clipped. We said, "Thank you." He nodded again and stepped off the path, disappearing into the brush like he had somewhere else to be. No trail there, no footprints either, just trees and dense undergrowth. We kept walking. Dylan joked that the guy seemed like a ghost ranger or a forest AI glitch. We laughed, but the energy dropped a little. Something didn't sit right with Sarah. She asked why he wasn't carrying anything. We shrugged. Maybe he was on patrol and had a vehicle stashed nearby. An hour later, we reached the next trail marker. A printed notice was stapled to the post. Temporary closure of fire roads due to erosion. No mention of bears, no warnings of any kind. Nothing about ranger patrols in this section. That night we camped near a creek, no fire, just cold food and quiet. No one said much. At some point, I realized none of us had seen any ranger stations on the map when planning the trip, not for that stretch. In the morning, we passed a group heading southbound, day hikers, older couple, walking with poles. We made small talk, and Dylan asked if they'd seen any rangers recently. They said no, not in days. And this trail, they added, wasn't usually patrolled. Too remote, not enough traffic. We asked if there was a station nearby. They shook their heads. Closest one was over 20 miles back, closer to a main road. No vehicles could reach where we were. Later that day, we reached a trailhead with an information board. Weather updates, animal sightings, maps. I looked for ranger schedules. There were none. But there was a posted flyer. Increased reports of impersonation in wilderness areas. Do not engage with individuals claiming to be officials without ID or visible gear. Report sightings to rangers or call. It didn't mention our area specifically, but it didn't need to. Sarah pointed out something I hadn't thought of. He hadn't asked to see our permits. Every ranger we'd ever met checked permits. We didn't report anything. We didn't take a photo. We'd let him walk away, and none of us had written down the time, the location, or his appearance beyond vague traits. Tall, clean clothes, orange vest. That evening, Sarah went through the photos she'd taken that day. Group shots, trees, trail signs. In one of them, blurred, mid-step, you could see someone just beyond the trees, off to the right. Not enough detail to see a face, but the orange stood out through the branches. We hadn't heard anyone following us. We hadn't passed him again. He wasn't standing. He was crouched, watching. We ended our trip early, 3 days short of the goal.